Most people think social anxiety is a fear disorder, a fear of speaking, a fear of judgment, a fear of embarrassment. And for a lot of people, especially early on, that's exactly what it is. But if you've lived with social anxiety for years, I don't think that's what it feels like anymore. Because at some point, it stopped feeling like fear and it started feeling like who you are. Not just, I'm afraid that other people are going to see me, more like, I'm an uninteresting person. Do you see the difference? One is something you feel, the other is something you believe you are. And that shift is one of the most important moments in the development of social anxiety. That is what this video is about. If you're new here, my name is Blake and I created socialanxietyhaven.com after recovering from social anxiety myself. Over the past several years, I've been trying to answer a question that I don't think gets asked often enough. Why does social anxiety become so difficult to change, even when we work so hard to overcome it? If you've lived with this condition for years, you've probably noticed something. It doesn't just become more intense, it becomes your life story. In the last video, I showed how two developmental pathways converge on the strategy underneath social anxiety: self-suppression. This video picks up where that one left off. Self-suppression is when you suppress who you are to protect yourself from social punishment. At the time you developed it, it was completely rational. If expressing yourself had led to rejection, of course your brain was going to start holding parts of yourself back from other people. It wasn't trying to hurt you, it was trying to protect you. But here's what I don't think people realize. Self-suppression doesn't just change the way you respond to other people. It changes the direction your life is moving. And that change happens so gradually, you probably never notice it. Let me ask you a question. Before you developed social anxiety, didn't part of you believe that friendship was still possible? You still wanted friends. You still believed connection was possible, but it was the anxiety that got in the way. When social anxiety comes, I think something fundamental changes. Every time you suppress yourself from other people, every time you hold a part of yourself back, every time you left a conversation convinced you were awkward, your brain wasn't just experiencing those moments, it was learning a lesson. And I think there are two things your brain has been learning all this time. The first is connection. We genuinely want to belong, to be accepted, to be known for who we really are. But the second is protection. We want to avoid rejection, embarrassment, exclusion. Every person has both of these goals. The question isn't whether they're there. The question is which one is organizing your behavior. Before social anxiety develops, connection is still the main goal. You're afraid, but you're still moving towards other people. You're hoping they'll like you. You're hoping you'll finally feel like you belong. But self-suppression changes this belief. Your brain becomes convinced that social exposure is dangerous. Every painful interaction, every moment of shame, every reason you find to hold yourself back makes avoiding rejection feel more and more important. Protection slowly feels like a greater priority, and with this change, your brain starts to learn something else. Not that you don't want connection. You still do. You probably want it more than ever. But what changes is your belief that it's actually possible. Little by little, your brain stops expecting that authentic connection is something you can realistically achieve, not because you stopped wanting it, but because you've stopped believing it's attainable. And those two changes are happening together. One goal is quietly rising, while the other is quietly falling, until eventually they cross in priority. There comes a point in the development of social anxiety where your brain is no longer organizing your social life around finding connection. It's organizing your social life around avoiding exclusion. And this difference is very important. Think about how different those two ways of living are. Before social anxiety, you walked into conversations hoping people would like you. Afterwards, you walked into conversations hoping nothing bad would happen. Before, your attention was on the other person, but afterwards, your attention was on yourself. You never stopped wanting connection. You stopped believing it was possible. And I believe that quiet shift, more than anything else, is the moment social anxiety stops feeling like something you experience and starts becoming the way you move through the world. It's a reorganization of the motivational system that's guiding your behavior. And once that reorganization happens, the condition has fundamentally changed. So the real question becomes, when does this actually happen? Most people imagine social anxiety has a specific moment, a specific epiphany where they realize something about themselves was wrong. But I don't think that's how it works. I don't think there's a moment you suddenly decide, I'm never going to connect with people ever again. I think the crossing happens so gradually that you almost never even notice it happening. It's the moment your brain quietly stops organizing your social life around finding connection and then starts organizing it around exclusion. The important thing to note, though, is that this doesn't mean you've stopped wanting friends. It doesn't mean you've stopped wanting to belong. Those desires are still there, but what's changed is what your brain believes is realistic. And once that happens, everything begins running through a different filter. For example, when I struggled with social anxiety, something I always felt was that if I revealed myself to other people, they wouldn't like me. I would go into social situations saying it was only a matter of time before they saw who I really was and reject me. This didn't mean that I didn't want friends or that I didn't want to connect with other people. It just meant that before the situation even began, my goal changed. I wasn't going into it thinking about connecting with other people. I was thinking about avoiding rejection. And that's the difference I'm trying to show. You no longer experience yourself as someone who's protecting themselves. You experience yourself as someone who is socially awkward, who is incapable. Those don't feel like conclusions. They feel like facts about who you are. And the reason they feel like facts is because your entire motivational system has been reorganized around a new strategy that authentic expression is dangerous. So here's what I hope you take away from this. If you've been living with social anxiety for years, the condition you're experiencing today probably isn't the same one that first began. At first, your brain was trying to help you find connection while protecting you from getting hurt. But over time, protection quietly became the goal. And that's the moment everything changed. Not because you became a different person, because your brain started organizing your life around a different objective. That's why social anxiety stops feeling like fear and starts feeling like who you are. Not because those beliefs suddenly became true, but because you've been living inside of a motivational system that has spent years collecting evidence through the lens of protection rather than connection. And once you understand that, the question changes. The next video is about what happens after this reorganization happens. Because once protection becomes the organizing goal, your brain doesn't remember your life the same way anymore. That's what we'll explore next. If you've been following this series and these ideas are helping you make sense of your own experience, I go much deeper into the clinical model in my newsletter. That's where I share the research behind these mechanisms, how they connect together, and the clinical protocol I'm building from this work. You can find it in the description below. I'll see you all in the next video.